I was kicked out at 18 with nothing. Now my parents are demanding my grandfather's millions. They have no idea what I'm about to do. Subscribe to the channel and like the video to see more stories like this. I was kicked out at 18 with nothing. Now my parents are demanding my grandfather's millions. They have no idea what I'm about to do. The letter sat on my kitchen counter, cream-colored paper with my mother's perfect cursive handwriting. "Dearest Sarah," it began, as if the past 10 years of silence had never happened, as if she hadn't stood in the doorway of my childhood home and told me I was no longer her daughter, as if my father hadn't changed the locks while I was at my graduation ceremony. The letter requested, no, demanded, a family meeting to discuss my grandfather's estate, my inheritance, money they believed belonged to them. I'm Sarah Mitchell, 28 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I was a financial analyst living a quiet life in Seattle. My estranged parents hadn't spoken to me since the day they kicked me out of their home for refusing to break up with my girlfriend, Maya. That was June of 2014, right after I turned 18. My mother had given me an ultimatum. Choose between that lifestyle and this family. I chose love. I chose myself. And I paid the price for 10 years. My grandfather, William Mitchell, had been the only family member who didn't turn his back on me. He died 6 months ago at 93, and his will had just been read. The inheritance was substantial, $12 million, his home in Connecticut, and his entire stock portfolio. Everything went to me. Not a single cent to my parents or my younger brother, Daniel. The lawyer who contacted me explained that Grandpa William had been very specific in his instructions. He'd watched how my family treated me and made his decision accordingly. The morning after receiving my mother's letter, I sat in my small apartment with Maya, who was now my wife of 5 years. She held my hand across our breakfast table, her dark eyes full of concern. "You don't have to respond to them," she said softly. "After what they did to you, you don't owe them anything." But I knew my parents. The letter was just the beginning. My mother, Patricia Mitchell, had always been persistent when she wanted something. My father, Robert Mitchell, had always backed her up without question. They'd raised me in a world where appearances mattered more than authenticity, where social standing trumped personal happiness. When I came out to them at 17, they'd tried to send me to conversion therapy. When I refused, they'd tolerated my presence until graduation, then cut me off completely. The phone calls started that afternoon. First my mother, her voice dripping with false warmth. "Sarah, darling, we need to talk about grandfather's will. There's obviously been some mistake. He wasn't in his right mind at the end." I didn't answer. Then my father, his tone more businesslike. "Sarah, this is absurd. That money belongs to the family. We need to discuss redistribution." Delete. Then Daniel, my brother who hadn't spoken to me in a decade. "Sarah, mom and dad are really upset. Can't you just share? It's the right thing to do." The demanding money started immediately. Text messages detailed their financial struggles, the mortgage on their 5-bedroom house, Daniel's medical school tuition, my mother's country club dues. Each message painted me as selfish, ungrateful, cruel for not immediately offering to help. They conveniently forgot that I'd put myself through community college working 3 jobs, that I'd slept in my car for 2 months after they kicked me out, that I'd built my entire adult life without a single dollar or word of support from them. I remember the day they kicked me out with painful clarity. It was a Saturday morning in June. I'd just graduated high school with honors. I was planning to attend the local community college in the fall, living at home to save money. Maya and I had been dating for 8 months. My parents knew about her but had made their disapproval clear through tight-lipped silences and strategic topic changes whenever her name came up. That morning, I made the mistake of leaving my journal on my bed. My mother had gone into my room to put away laundry and found it. In those pages, I'd written about my feelings for Maya, my fears about my parents' reaction, my plans for our future together. When I came home from my graduation practice at noon, both my parents were waiting in the living room, my journal open on the coffee table between them. "Sit down," my father had said, his voice cold. I sat. My mother was crying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, though I noticed her makeup remained perfect. "How could you do this to us?" she'd asked. "After everything we've given you, after all the sacrifices we've made." I tried to explain. I told them I loved Maya. I told them this was who I was, who I'd always been. I begged them to understand. My father had cut me off. "We will not have this perversion in our home. We will not be associated with this lifestyle. You have a choice, Sarah. Break up with that girl and live according to our values, or leave." I'd looked at my mother, hoping for some softness, some maternal protection. She'd looked away. "Your father is right. This is not negotiable. I can't change who I am," I'd whispered. "Then you're not our daughter anymore," my father had replied. He'd stood up, pulled out his wallet, and placed $300 on the table. "Take what you can carry. You have 1 hour." I'd packed a duffel bag with clothes, my laptop, and a few photographs. One of those photos was of Grandpa William and me from when I was 15. We were standing in his garden, both of us laughing at something. I'd grabbed it without thinking, and it turned out to be the most important thing I took. My mother had stood in the doorway as I left, arms crossed. "When you come to your senses and leave that girl, you can come home," she'd said. I never looked back. Maya's parents had taken me in that summer. They'd given me a safe place to sleep, helped me find jobs, encouraged me to pursue my education. They'd shown me what real family looked like. Not people who shared your blood, but people who loved you unconditionally. When Maya and I got married 5 years ago in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard, they'd walked both of us down the aisle. My parents hadn't been invited. Neither had Daniel, who'd made it clear he supported our parents' decision. Now, sitting in my apartment with my mother's letter in hand, I thought about everything that had happened in those 10 years. I thought about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was unlovable. The therapy sessions where I'd worked through the trauma of family betrayal. The holidays spent with Maya's family, grateful but aching for what I'd lost. The birthday cards I'd sent to my parents for the first 3 years that went unanswered. The Christmas gifts I'd mailed to Daniel that were returned unopened. Grandpa William had been different. He'd found me 6 months after I was kicked out. He'd hired a private investigator to locate me, then shown up at the coffee shop where I was working. "Your parents are fools," he'd told me over coffee. I didn't raise my son to be a bigot, but apparently I failed somewhere. He'd apologized for not intervening sooner, explained that he'd been trying to reason with my father privately, but finally accepted it was hopeless. From that day forward, Grandpa William had been my family. He'd helped me pay for community college. He'd attended my graduation when I transferred to the University of Washington. He'd been at my wedding, standing proudly beside Maya's father. We'd had dinner once a month, talked on the phone every week. He'd met Maya's parents and declared them the finest people he'd ever known. When he got sick last year, I'd visited him every weekend, sitting beside his hospital bed, holding his hand. 2 weeks before he died, Grandpa William had told me about his will. "Your parents will be angry," he'd said, his voice weak but clear. "They'll demand what they think is theirs. But Sarah, that money is yours because you earned it by being brave enough to be yourself. Don't let them take it. Don't let them make you feel guilty for what they threw away." I'd promised him I wouldn't. Now, holding my mother's letter, I intended to keep that promise. But I wasn't just going to ignore them. I wasn't going to hide from their demands. I was going to face them, make them see exactly what they'd done, and ensure they understood the consequences of their choices. My parents wanted a family meeting. They were going to get one, just not the kind they expected. Maya squeezed my hand, pulling me back to the present. "What are you thinking?" she asked. I looked at her, this woman who'd stood by me through everything, who'd loved me when my own parents couldn't. "I'm thinking it's time they learn the truth," I said. "All of it." I picked up my phone and typed a response to my mother's letter. "I'll meet with you one time, this Saturday at 2 in the afternoon at Grandpa William's house. Come prepared to listen." I hit send before I could second guess myself. Within seconds, my mother responded. "We'll be there. Thank you, darling. I knew you'd see reason." See reason. As if I were the unreasonable one. As if they hadn't committed the ultimate family betrayal by choosing their prejudices over their daughter. I put the phone down and looked at Maya. "Will you come with me?" I asked. She smiled. "Always." The next few days were a blur of preparation. I wasn't walking into this meeting blind or vulnerable. I'd spent 10 years building a life, and I'd spent the last 3 weeks since learning about the inheritance gathering every piece of evidence I needed to show my parents exactly who they'd discarded. Maya helped me organize everything into folders. Bank statements showing the $300 they'd given me had lasted exactly 2 weeks before I was completely broke. Pay stubs from the coffee shop, the grocery store, and the call center where I'd worked simultaneously to afford my first apartment. Transcripts from community college showing I'd maintained a 4.0 GPA while working full-time. Letters of recommendation from professors who'd seen my potential. My acceptance letter to the University of Washington. Photos from my college graduation where Grandpa William stood beside me, beaming with pride. But the most important documents were the ones Grandpa William's lawyer had given me. Copies of emails my father had sent to Grandpa William over the years, demanding he cut off contact with me. Letters from my mother claiming I was a bad influence on Daniel, that my lifestyle would corrupt him. Text messages where they'd explicitly told Grandpa William that if he continued supporting me, they would cut him out of their lives too. He'd chosen me anyway. There were also the birthday cards I'd sent to my parents and Daniel, all returned unopened. 3 years worth of attempts to maintain some connection, all rejected. Photos from my wedding that I'd mailed to them with a note saying they were welcome to attend if they changed their minds. The envelope had come back with "return to sender" scrawled across it in my father's handwriting. The most damning evidence, however, was recent. My mother's lawyer had sent a letter to Grandpa William's estate attorney 3 days after the will was read, contesting the inheritance on grounds of undue influence and claiming I'd manipulated a dying old man. They'd actually put that in writing. They'd accused me of elder abuse to try to steal what Grandpa William had freely given me. On Thursday evening, 2 days before the scheduled meeting, Daniel called. I answered, curious what he'd say after 10 years of silence. "Sarah," he said, his voice uncertain. He'd been 18 when I last saw him. Now he was 28, the same age I'd been when our parents kicked me out. "Look, I know this is weird, but Mom and Dad wanted me to call you." "Of course they did," I said. "What do they want, Daniel?" "They're really struggling financially. Dad's business hasn't been doing well, and with my medical school loans, they're barely keeping up with their mortgage. They thought Grandpa would leave them something to help out. When he didn't, it really hurt them." The audacity was breathtaking. "They're hurt?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Daniel, do you remember what they did to me?" There was a long pause. "You chose to leave," he finally said. "You knew they couldn't accept your lifestyle, and you chose it anyway. That was your decision." I'd expected this, but it still stung. My own brother had rewritten history in his mind, turned my parents' cruelty into my choice. "I chose to be honest about who I am," I said carefully. "They chose to kick me out rather than love me as I am. Those aren't the same thing." "Mom and Dad did what they thought was right," Daniel insisted. "They were trying to protect the family values we were raised with. You're the one who rejected those values." "Daniel," I said, and I could hear the weariness in my own voice, "do you know where I slept the first 2 months after they kicked me out?" "With your girlfriend, I assume." "In my car. Maya's parents were out of the country for the summer, and I didn't have anyone else. I slept in a parking garage and showered at the community center. I ate peanut butter sandwiches twice a day because that's all I could afford after paying for my phone so potential employers could reach me. I was 18 years old, and your parents, our parents, knew exactly where I was because Grandpa William told them. They knew and they did nothing. Silence on the other end. Then, you never told anyone that. Who was I going to tell? The family that disowned me? I told Grandpa William, and he's the one who found me and helped me. He's the one who made sure I didn't become another homeless queer kid with no support system. He saved my life, Daniel. And now Mom and Dad want to take away what he left me because they think they deserve it more. It's not about deserving, Daniel said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. It's about family taking care of each other. Family, I repeated. When did they take care of me? When they read my private journal without permission? When they gave me an ultimatum between my identity and a roof over my head? When they changed the locks so I couldn't come back? When they returned my birthday cards unopened for 3 years? When they called Grandpa William an old fool for supporting me? Tell me, Daniel, when exactly did they act like family? Another long silence. The meeting on Saturday, he finally said. Are you really coming? Yes. Are you? Mom and Dad want me there. They think you'll be more reasonable if I'm present. I almost laughed. Daniel, I'm going to be very reasonable. I'm going to show them exactly what being reasonable looks like. See you Saturday. I hung up before he could respond. Maya, who'd been listening from the kitchen doorway, came over and wrapped her arms around me. You okay? She asked. I will be, I said. After Saturday, I will be. Friday morning, I called Mr. Harrison, Grandpa William's estate attorney. He was in his 60s, a distinguished man who'd handled my grandfather's legal affairs for 30 years. Miss Mitchell, he greeted me warmly. How are you holding up? As well as can be expected. I wanted to confirm you'll be at the meeting tomorrow. Absolutely. Your grandfather was very specific about wanting me present for any discussions regarding his estate. He anticipated your parents might make demands and wanted to ensure you had legal support. Thank you. There's something else. My mother's attorney sent a letter contesting the will, claiming undue influence. Mr. Harrison sighed. Yes, I received that. It's a baseless claim, Miss Mitchell. Your grandfather was evaluated by 3 separate doctors in the months before he died, all of whom confirmed he was of sound mind. Additionally, he'd been updating his will for 5 years as he watched how your family treated you. There's a clear paper trail showing his decision was made over time, not impulsively. Can they really challenge it? They can try. It will be expensive for them and ultimately unsuccessful. Your grandfather documented everything meticulously. He even kept recordings of conversations with your parents where they demanded he stop supporting you. If they want to go to court, they'll lose, and it will cost them tens of thousands in legal fees. That was exactly what I needed to hear. One more thing. The inheritance included Grandpa's house. What's the property worth? Approximately $2 million. It's a beautiful estate, fully paid off. Why do you ask? Just making sure I understand what we're discussing tomorrow. I thanked him and hung up. Maya looked at me questioningly. The house is worth $2 million, I told her. That's on top of the $12 million in cash and investments. Your parents know this? They know. That's why they're so desperate. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove past my childhood home. It was a large colonial in an upscale neighborhood, the kind of house that screamed success and status. The lawn was immaculately maintained, the paint fresh, the driveway filled with my father's luxury sedan and my mother's SUV. From the outside, everything looked perfect. It always had. I remembered playing in that yard as a child, remembered my mother hosting garden parties where everything was carefully staged for the neighbors. I remembered my father's study where he'd lectured me about the importance of appearances, of maintaining the family reputation. I remembered the day they told me I had to choose between being their daughter and being myself, and how I'd walked out that front door for the last time carrying everything I owned in one duffel bag. The lights were on inside. Through the windows, I could see movement. My family was in there, probably discussing strategy for tomorrow's meeting, probably planning what they'd say to convince me to hand over my inheritance, probably imagining I'd be the same scared 18-year-old girl they'd thrown away, desperate for their approval and willing to do anything to get it back. They were wrong. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd built a life without them, who'd learned that blood didn't make family, who'd found love and acceptance in places they'd never thought to look. A woman who'd inherited millions, not because she'd manipulated anyone, but because her grandfather had seen her worth when they couldn't. I drove back to my apartment where Maya was making dinner. We ate together, talking about our plans for after the meeting. We were thinking about buying a house in Seattle, something with a yard for the dog we'd been wanting to adopt. Maya wanted to go back to school to get her master's degree in social work. I wanted to start a nonprofit supporting homeless LGBTQ youth. Grandpa William's inheritance would make all of that possible. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I dressed carefully in a tailored pantsuit, professional and put together. Maya wore a similar outfit. We looked like what we were, successful adults who'd built good lives, not the struggling, desperate people my parents probably expected. The drive to Grandpa William's house in Connecticut took 3 hours. I'd made this drive countless times over the past 10 years, but today felt different. Today I was entering not as a grateful granddaughter visiting family, but as the owner of the property. Everything inside those walls was now mine. The books, the furniture, the photographs on the walls, the garden Grandpa William had spent decades cultivating, all of it mine because he'd chosen to give it to me. My parents' car was already in the driveway when we arrived. So was Daniel's. They were early, probably hoping to have time to look around, to calculate the value of what they thought should be theirs. Mr. Harrison's car pulled up right behind ours. He got out, carrying a leather briefcase. Ready? He asked. Ready, I confirmed. We walked up to the front door together. I used the key Mr. Harrison had given me after the will was read, and opened the door to the home where I'd always felt loved and accepted. My parents and Daniel were sitting in the living room, but they stood when we entered. My mother's eyes immediately went to Maya, and I saw her lips thin with disapproval. My father's gaze lingered on Mr. Harrison, clearly displeased by the lawyer's presence. presence. Sarah, my mother said, forcing a smile, thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us. We have so much to discuss about poor father's estate and how we can fairly distribute. Sit down, I interrupted. The command in my voice surprised even me. My mother's eyes widened, but she sat. So did my father and Daniel. Maya and I took seats across from them. Mr. Harrison remained standing, positioned slightly behind me like a guardian. My father cleared his throat. Sarah, we appreciate you taking the time to— No, I said. You don't get to do that. You don't get to pretend this is a normal family discussion. You don't get to act like the past 10 years didn't happen. I'm going to talk, and you're going to listen. When I'm done, you can respond. Understood? My mother looked at my father, clearly expecting him to take control of the situation, but something in my expression must have stopped him because he simply nodded. I pulled out the first folder from my bag and set it on the coffee table. This, I said, is documentation of every interaction we've had since you kicked me out 10 years ago. Every birthday card I sent that you returned unopened. Every letter I wrote that went unanswered. Every attempt I made to maintain some connection that you rejected. My mother's hand went to her throat. Sarah, we were hurt too. You rejected everything we taught you, everything we believed in. I rejected nothing, I said, my voice sharp. I simply told you the truth about who I am, and instead of loving me anyway, you gave me an ultimatum and then threw me out when I refused to lie about myself. I opened the second folder. This contains financial records from my first 5 years on my own. Bank statements showing that $300 you gave me lasted exactly 14 days. Pay stubs from 3 different jobs I worked simultaneously. Receipts from the parking garage where I slept in my car for 2 months because I had nowhere else to go. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. My father's face had gone pale. My mother was shaking her head. You never told us you were sleeping in your car. You never asked. Grandpa William told you exactly where I was and that I needed help. You chose to do nothing. I pulled out another document. This is an email from Dad to Grandpa William, dated August 15, 2014, 2 months after you kicked me out. In it, you wrote, and I quote, Father, I'm asking you one last time to stop enabling Sarah's delusions. If she wants to live that lifestyle, she can face the consequences without family support. If you continue helping her, you're teaching her that actions don't have consequences. My father's jaw clenched. I was trying to teach you responsibility. Responsibility? I repeated. I was 18 years old, working 3 jobs while going to school full time. I was more responsible than you ever taught me to be. What you were teaching me was that your love was conditional, that I was only worthy of being your daughter if I pretended to be someone I wasn't. I pulled out the wedding photo Maya and I had sent them. This is the picture from our wedding 5 years ago. We mailed it to you with an invitation. You sent it back with return to sender written across it. You didn't even open it. I looked at Daniel. You too. We invited you separately. You sent back a letter saying you couldn't support our sinful union. Daniel looked away. Mom and Dad asked me to, and you did. You always did what they asked, didn't you? Even when it meant cutting off your own sister. My mother leaned forward. Sarah, we understand you're angry, but that's all in the past. We're here now, trying to make things right. Family should forgive and move forward. Your father and I have done a lot of thinking, and we realize we may have been too harsh. May have been? I cut her off. You disowned me. You told me I wasn't your daughter anymore. You kicked me out of my home with 1 hour's notice and $300. You cut off all contact for 10 years. And now, 3 weeks after learning about Grandpa William's will, you suddenly want to make things right? Do you think I'm stupid? Don't speak to your mother that way, my father said, his voice rising. She's not my mother, I said flatly. You both made that very clear 10 years ago. A mother doesn't abandon her child for being gay. A father doesn't throw his daughter out for refusing to deny who she is. You're the people who share my DNA, nothing more. The words hung in the air. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they looked more like anger than sadness. My father's face had turned red. Daniel stared at the floor. I pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the others. This contains copies of every communication between you and Grandpa William regarding me over the past 10 years. Emails where you demanded he stop supporting me. Letters where you called him senile for choosing to maintain a relationship with me. Text messages where you told him you'd cut him out of your lives if he continued helping me. My father stood abruptly. Those were private conversations, which Grandpa William carefully documented and preserved. Mr. Harrison interjected smoothly. Mr. Mitchell, I advise you to sit down and listen. My father looked at the attorney, seemed to calculate his options, and sat back down. I continued. Grandpa William chose me, not because I manipulated him, not because he was senile or confused, but because he watched how you treated me and decided you didn't deserve his money. He saw you for what you are, people who value appearances more than your own child, people who would rather maintain social standing than show basic human decency. That's not fair, my mother protested. We were trying to protect our family values, our reputation in the community. Your reputation, I said. Not mine, not Daniel's, yours. You were worried about what people would think at your country club, what they'd say at church, how it would look to your neighbors. None of it had anything to do with actually loving me or caring about my well-being. I pulled out the final folder. This is the letter your attorney sent to Mr. Harrison, contesting Grandpa William's will on grounds of undue influence. You actually claimed I manipulated a dying man to steal his inheritance. You accused me of elder abuse. My mother's face went white. That was just legal strategy. Our attorney said it was standard procedure. It's also slander, Mr. Harrison said calmly, and entirely baseless. Mr. William Mitchell was evaluated by 3 different doctors, all of whom confirmed his mental competence. He'd been updating his will for 5 years, documenting his reasoning for every change. If you proceed with this challenge, you will lose, and it will cost you tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. My father and mother exchanged glances. The reality of their situation plan was finally sinking in. They'd burned every bridge, played every card, and they were losing. Now, I said, leaning back in my chair, let's talk about why you really asked for this meeting. You want money. You want me to hand over part or all of my inheritance because you think family should share. You think that because we're related by blood, I owe you something. Sarah, please, my mother said, and now the tears seemed genuine. Your father's business is struggling. We have a second mortgage on the house. Daniel's medical school loans are crushing us. We're not asking for all of it, just enough to help us get stable again. You have $12 million. Surely you can spare some of it for your family. My family, I repeated. Maya is my family. Her parents, who took me in when you threw me out, are my family. Grandpa William was my family. You are not my family. You made that choice 10 years ago, and I'm honoring it. Daniel finally spoke up. Sarah, please. I know things were bad between you and mom and dad, but I'm your brother. I never did anything to hurt you directly. Can't you help me with my student loans? Just the loans, nothing else. I looked at him, this stranger who shared my features. Daniel, when I was putting myself through community college, working 3 jobs to afford tuition and rent, did you ever reach out? Did you ever ask how I was doing? I was just a kid. You were 18 when I was kicked out, the same age I was, old enough to make your own choices. You chose to side with them. You chose to return my letters unopened, to send back my wedding invitation with a note about my sinful union. You chose this, Daniel, and now you're facing the consequences. That's cruel, my mother whispered. Cruel. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. Cruel is kicking your daughter out of her home. Cruel is giving her an ultimatum between her identity and your love. Cruel is cutting off all contact for a decade and then showing up demanding money the moment you find out she inherited millions. What I'm doing isn't cruel. It's simply refusing to be your victim anymore. My father stood as well, his face flushed with anger. This is exactly why father shouldn't have left you anything. You're vindictive, you're selfish, and you're using that money to punish us for trying to raise you right. Trying to raise me right? My voice rose. You tried to send me to conversion therapy. You told me I was perverted, that I was going to hell, that I was destroying the family. That's not raising someone right. That's abuse. We were protecting you. From what? From being happy? From being loved? From living an authentic life? I grabbed the photo of Grandpa William and me from the folder and held it up. This man protected me. This man loved me unconditionally. This man saw me for who I really am and decided I was worth fighting for. You saw the real me and decided I was disposable. That's the difference between him and you. The room fell silent except for my mother's quiet crying. My father looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Daniel was staring at his hands. Maya stood beside me, a silent pillar of support. Mr. Harrison waited patiently, briefcase still in hand. Finally, my mother wiped her eyes and looked up at me. So that's it? You're going to keep everything and leave us with nothing? After everything we did for you for 18 years? Everything you did for me for 18 years came with conditions, I said. Love shouldn't have conditions. Family shouldn't have conditions. But yours did. And when I couldn't meet those conditions, you took everything away. Now you want me to rescue you from your own choices? No, I won't do it. But the house, my father started. This house is mine. Grandpa William left it to me, along with everything in it. You need to leave. Sarah, please. My mother stood, reaching toward me. I stepped back. No, you had your chance to be my family. You had 10 years to reach out, to apologize, to try to make things right. You did nothing. The only reason you're here now is because of money. That's not family. That's greed. What about us? Daniel asked, standing as well. What about our relationship? We're siblings, Sarah. That has to mean something. It meant something to me for 3 years, I said. 3 years of cards you returned, of letters you ignored, of invitations you rejected. You taught me that being siblings wasn't enough. You chose their approval over any relationship with me. I'm simply accepting the choice you made. My father's hands clenched into fists. This is what that lifestyle has done to you. It's made you hard, unforgiving. No, I interrupted. You did this. You threw me out and taught me I couldn't count on you. You showed me that family was something I'd have to build for myself, so I did. And now you're angry because the family I built doesn't include you. Mr. Harrison finally stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, Daniel, I think it's time for you to go. Miss Mitchell has made her position clear. If you wish to challenge the will, you're welcome to do so. But I should warn you that you'll be unsuccessful and it will be expensive. I suggest you accept the situation and move on. My father looked at me one last time. You'll regret this. No, I said. I won't. The only thing I regret is wasting 3 years trying to maintain a connection with people who never wanted one. They left. My mother was crying openly now, leaning on my father. Daniel looked back once, his expression unreadable, then followed them out. We heard their cars start, heard them drive away. The house fell silent. I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Maya sat beside me, taking my hand. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat gently. You did well, Miss Mitchell. That took tremendous courage. It took 10 years, I said. 10 years to build enough strength to face them. Your grandfather would be very proud, Mr. Harrison said. He knew this day would come. He prepared for it because he wanted you to be ready. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. He asked me to give you this after you'd confronted your parents. He wrote it 2 months before he died. I took the envelope with shaking hands. My name was written across it in Grandpa William's familiar handwriting. I opened it carefully and pulled out the letter inside. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I wasn't walking into this meeting blind or vulnerable. I'd spent 10 years building a life, and I'd spent the last 3 weeks since learning about the inheritance gathering every piece of evidence I needed to show my parents exactly who they'd discarded. Maya helped me organize everything into folders. Bank statements showing the $300 they'd given me had lasted exactly 2 weeks before I was completely broke. Pay stubs from the coffee shop, the grocery store, store, and the call center where I'd worked simultaneously to afford my first apartment. Transcripts from community college showing I'd maintained a 4.0 GPA while working full-time. Letters of recommendation from professors who'd seen my potential. My acceptance letter to the University of Washington. Photos from my college graduation where Grandpa William stood beside me, beaming with pride. But the most important documents were the ones Grandpa William's lawyer had given me. Copies of emails my father had sent to Grandpa William over the years, demanding he cut off contact with me. Letters from my mother claiming I was a bad influence on Daniel, that my lifestyle would corrupt him. Text messages where they'd explicitly told Grandpa William that if he continued supporting me, they would cut him out of their lives too. He'd chosen me anyway. There were also the birthday cards I'd sent to my parents and Daniel, all returned unopened. 3 years worth of attempts to maintain some connection, all rejected. Photos from my wedding that I'd mailed to them with a note saying they were welcome to attend if they changed their minds. The envelope had come back with "return to sender" scrawled across it in my father's handwriting. The most damning evidence, however, was recent. My mother's lawyer had sent a letter to Grandpa William's estate attorney 3 days after the will was read, contesting the inheritance on grounds of undue influence and claiming I'd manipulated a dying old man. They'd actually put that in writing. They'd accused me of elder abuse to try to steal what Grandpa William had freely given me. On Thursday evening, 2 days before the scheduled meeting, Daniel called. I answered, curious what he'd say after 10 years of silence. "Sarah," he said, his voice uncertain. He'd been 18 when I last saw him. Now he was 28, the same age I'd been when our parents kicked me out. "Look, I know this is weird, but Mom and Dad wanted me to call you." "Of course they did," I said. "What do they want, Daniel?" "They're really struggling financially. Dad's business hasn't been doing well, and with my medical school loans, they're barely keeping up with their mortgage. They thought Grandpa would leave them something to help out. When he didn't, it really hurt them." The audacity was breathtaking. "They're hurt?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Daniel, do you remember what they did to me?" There was a long pause. "You chose to leave," he finally said. "You knew they couldn't accept your lifestyle, and you chose it anyway. That was your decision." I'd expected this, but it still stung. My own brother had rewritten history in his mind, turned my parents' cruelty into my choice. "I chose to be honest about who I am," I said carefully. "They chose to kick me out rather than love me as I am. Those aren't the same thing." "Mom and Dad did what they thought was right," Daniel insisted. "They were trying to protect the family values we were raised with. You're the one who rejected those values." "Daniel," I said, and I could hear the weariness in my own voice. "Do you know where I slept the first 2 months after they kicked me out?" "With your girlfriend, I assume." "In my car. Maya's parents were out of the country for the summer, and I didn't have anyone else. I slept in a parking garage and showered at the community center. I ate peanut butter sandwiches twice a day because that's all I could afford after paying for my phone so potential employers could reach me. I was 18 years old, and your parents, our parents, knew exactly where I was because Grandpa William told them. They knew, and they did nothing. Silence on the other end. Then, you never told anyone that. Who was I going to tell? The family that disowned me? I told Grandpa William, and he's the one who found me and helped me. He's the one who made sure I didn't become another homeless queer kid with no support system. He saved my life, Daniel. And now Mom and Dad want to take away what he left me because they think they deserve it more. It's not about deserving," Daniel said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "It's about family taking care of each other." "Family," I repeated. "When did they take care of me? When they read my private journal without permission? When they gave me an ultimatum between my identity and a roof over my head? When they changed the locks so I couldn't come back? When they returned my birthday cards unopened for 3 years? When they called Grandpa William an old fool for supporting me? Tell me, Daniel, when exactly did they act like family?" Another long silence. "The meeting on Saturday," he finally said. "Are you really coming?" "Yes." "Are you?" "Mom and Dad want me there. They think you'll be more reasonable if I'm present." I almost laughed. "Daniel, I'm going to be very reasonable. I'm going to show them exactly what being reasonable looks like. See you Saturday." I hung up before he could respond. Maya, who'd been listening from the kitchen doorway, came over and wrapped her arms around me. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be," I said. "After Saturday, I will be." Friday morning, I called Mr. Harrison, Grandpa William's estate attorney. He was in his 60s, a distinguished man who'd handled my grandfather's legal affairs for 30 years. "Miss Mitchell," he greeted me warmly. "How are you holding up?" "As well as can be expected. I wanted to confirm you'll be at the meeting tomorrow." "Absolutely. Your grandfather was very specific about wanting me present for any discussions regarding his estate. He anticipated your parents might make demands and wanted to ensure you had legal support." "Thank you. There's something else. My mother's attorney sent a letter contesting the will, claiming undue influence." Mr. Harrison sighed. "Yes, I received that. It's a baseless claim, Miss Mitchell. Your grandfather was evaluated by 3 separate doctors in the months before he died, all of whom confirmed he was of sound mind. Additionally, he'd been updating his will for 5 years as he watched how your family treated you. There's a clear paper trail showing his decision was made over time, not impulsively. Can they really challenge it? They can try. It will be expensive for them and ultimately unsuccessful. Your grandfather documented everything meticulously. He even kept recordings of conversations with your parents where they demanded he stop supporting you. If they want to go to court, they'll lose and it will cost them tens of thousands in legal fees." That was exactly what I needed to hear. "One more thing. The inheritance included Grandpa's house. What's the property worth?" "Approximately $2 million. It's a beautiful estate, fully paid off." "Why do you ask?" "Just making sure I understand what we're discussing tomorrow." I thanked him and hung up. Maya looked at me questioningly. "The house is worth $2 million, I told her. "That's on top of the $12 million in cash and investment. endorsements. Your parents know this? They know. That's why they're so desperate. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove past my childhood home. It was a large colonial in an upscale neighborhood, the kind of house that screamed success and status. The lawn was immaculately maintained, the paint fresh, the driveway filled with my father's luxury sedan and my mother's SUV. From the outside, everything looked perfect. It always had. I remembered playing in that yard as a child, remembered my mother hosting garden parties where everything was carefully staged for the neighbors. I remembered my father's study where he'd lectured me about the importance of appearances, of maintaining the family reputation. I remembered the day they told me I had to choose between being their daughter and being myself, and how I'd walked out that front door for the last time carrying everything I owned in one duffel bag. The lights were on inside. Through the windows, I could see movement. My family was in there, probably discussing strategy for tomorrow's meeting, probably planning what they'd say to convince me to hand over my inheritance, probably imagining I'd be the same scared 18-year-old girl they'd thrown away, desperate for their approval and willing to do anything to get it back. They were wrong. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd built a life without them, who'd learned that blood didn't make family, who'd found love and acceptance in places they'd never thought to look. A woman who'd inherited millions, not because she'd manipulated anyone, but because her grandfather had seen her worth when they couldn't. I drove back to my apartment where Maya was making dinner. We ate together, talking about our plans for after the meeting. We were thinking about buying a house in Seattle, something with a yard for the dog we'd been wanting to adopt. Maya wanted to go back to school to get her master's degree in social work. I wanted to start a nonprofit supporting homeless LGBTQ youth. Grandpa William's inheritance would make all of that possible. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I dressed carefully in a tailored pantsuit, professional and put together. Maya wore a similar outfit. We looked like what we were, successful adults who'd built good lives, not the struggling, desperate people my parents probably expected. The drive to Grandpa William's house in Connecticut took 3 hours. I'd made this drive countless times over the past 10 years, but today felt different. Today I was entering not as a grateful granddaughter visiting family, but as the owner of the property. Everything inside those walls was now mine. The books, the furniture, the photographs on the walls, the garden Grandpa William had spent decades cultivating. All of it mine because he'd chosen to give it to me. My parents' car was already in the driveway when we arrived. So was Daniel's. They were early, probably hoping to have time to look around, to calculate the value of what they thought should be theirs. Mr. Harrison's car pulled up right behind ours. He got out, carrying a leather briefcase. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," I confirmed. We walked up to the front door together. I used the key Mr. Harrison had given me after the will was read, and opened the door to the home where I'd always felt loved and accepted. My parents and Daniel were sitting in the living room, but they stood when we entered. My mother's eyes immediately went to Maya, and I saw her lips thin with disapproval. My father's gaze lingered on Mr. Harrison, clearly displeased by the lawyer's presence. "Sarah," my mother said, forcing a smile, "thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us. We have so much to discuss about your father's estate and how we can fairly distribute—" "Sit down," I interrupted. The command in my voice surprised even me. My mother's eyes widened, but she sat. So did my father and Daniel. Maya and I took seats across from them. Mr. Harrison remained standing, positioned slightly behind me like a guardian. My father cleared his throat. "Sarah, we appreciate you taking the time to—" "No," I said. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to pretend this is a normal family discussion. You don't get to act like the past 10 years didn't happen. I'm going to talk, and you're going to listen. When I'm done, you can respond. Understood?" My mother looked at my father, clearly expecting him to take control of the situation. But something in my expression must have stopped him because he simply nodded. I pulled out the first folder from my bag and set it on the coffee table. "This," I said, "is documentation of every interaction we've had since you kicked me out 10 years ago. Every birthday card I sent that you returned unopened. Every letter I wrote that went unanswered. Every attempt I made to maintain some connection that you rejected. My dearest Sarah," it began, "if you're reading this, it means you've finally confronted your parents about their demands. I'm proud of you for standing firm. I know it wasn't easy." My eyes filled with tears as I continued reading. "I want you to understand why I left everything to you. It wasn't to punish your parents, though they certainly deserve it. It was to give you the freedom to build the life you deserve without financial worry. You've spent 10 years proving you could survive on your own. Now I want you to thrive. I watched you grow from a scared teenager sleeping in your car into a strong, successful woman who built a life through sheer determination. You never asked me for more than I offered. You never expected anything from me. You loved me simply because I loved you. And that's the purest form of family I've ever known. Your parents will never understand what they lost when they threw you away. They'll never comprehend that the daughter they disowned was worth more than any inheritance I could have left them. But you know your worth, Sarah. You've always known it, even when they tried to convince you otherwise. Don't let them guilt you. Don't let them manipulate you. You owe them nothing. They made their choices, and those choices have consequences. The money is yours, freely given with no strings attached. Use it to build something beautiful. Help others who've been discarded by their families. Show the world what unconditional love looks like. I love you, my brave girl. I always have, and I always will. Live well, love hard. Make them regret every moment they didn't spend knowing the remarkable woman you became. With all my love, Grandpa William." I couldn't read the last paragraph out loud. I just held the letter against my chest and cried. Maya wrapped her arms around me, and even Mr. Harrison's eyes looked misty. When I finally composed myself, Mr. Harrison said, "There's more. I'm I'm afraid. Or perhaps something you should know. He pulled out another document. Your parents have been in significant financial trouble for 3 years. Their lifestyle has always exceeded their income, and they've been relying on credit to maintain appearances. They currently owe over $300,000 in various debts. $300,000? Maya repeated, shocked. Yes, the second mortgage on their home, Daniel's medical school loans, which your parents co-signed for, credit card debt, and a failed business investment your father made 2 years ago. They were counting on your grandfather's inheritance to solve their problems. When the will was read and they received nothing, their situation became desperate. I thought about the expensive car in their driveway, the immaculate house, my mother's designer clothes, all of it a facade, all of it borrowed money they couldn't repay. How long before they lose the house? 3 months, perhaps 4 if they can negotiate with the bank. They're behind on mortgage payments. Part of me felt a sick satisfaction at this news. They were finally facing real consequences for their choices. But another part, a smaller part I wished didn't exist, felt a twinge of something that might have been pity. I pushed it away. Let them face it, I said. They chose appearances over their daughter. They can live with the consequences. Mr. Harrison nodded. There's one more thing. Your grandfather also left a trust fund, separate from your inheritance. It's to be used specifically for supporting LGBTQ youth who've been kicked out by their families. He established it 5 years ago and funded it with $2 million. He wanted you to manage it. I looked up at him, surprise cutting through my grief. He did what? He created the William Mitchell Foundation for Displaced LGBTQ Youth. It provides emergency housing, educational support, and counseling services. He's been running it quietly for years, but now he wants you to take over. There's a board of directors already in place, but you'd be the primary decision maker. Maya squeezed my hand. Sarah, that's incredible. It was more than incredible. It was perfect. Grandpa William had taken his pain at watching his family betray me and turned it into something that could help others. He'd created exactly what I'd needed when I was 18 and terrified and alone. I'll do it, I said immediately. I'll run the foundation. Mr. Harrison smiled. I hoped you'd say that. The foundation has helped over 200 young people in the past 5 years. With your involvement and the additional resources from your inheritance, if you choose to contribute, we could help thousands. We spent the next hour discussing the foundation's operations. There were 3 emergency housing facilities, a scholarship program, partnerships with therapists who specialized in family trauma, and a legal aid service for kids whose parents tried to force them into conversion therapy. Grandpa William had built something extraordinary. As Mr. Harrison was leaving, he paused at the door. Miss Mitchell, your grandfather told me something before he died. He said, I failed my son by raising him to value the wrong things. I won't fail my granddaughter by leaving her without the means to show the world what real values look like. You're his second chance to get it right. Don't waste it. After he left, Maya and I walked through Grandpa William's house. Every room held memories. The kitchen where we'd made cookies together, the library where he'd taught me to play chess, the garden where we'd spent countless afternoons talking about everything and nothing. This was home in a way my parents' house had never been. What do you want to do with this place? Maya asked as we stood in the garden, looking at the roses Grandpa William had loved. I want to keep it, I said. Maybe we could move here. Use it as a base for running the foundation. Turn some of the rooms into office space. You want to leave Seattle? I thought about it. Seattle had been a refuge, a place far from my family and their judgment, but I didn't need refuge anymore. I was strong enough to be anywhere, do anything. This house should be used for something good. Grandpa William would want that. We spent that night in the house, sleeping in the guest room I'd always used when I visited. The next morning, we started making plans, real, concrete plans for our future. But first, I had one more thing to do. I drove to my parents' house alone. Maya offered to come, but this was something I needed to do by myself. When I knocked on the door, my mother answered. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked older somehow, more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Sarah, she said, surprise evident in her voice. I'm not here to give you money, I said immediately. I want to make that clear. Her face fell. Then why are you here? To give you something else. Information. I pulled out a folder from my bag. This contains contact information for credit counseling services, bankruptcy attorneys, and resources for downsizing. If you're going to survive your financial crisis, you need to face reality. She took the folder with shaking hands. I don't understand. I'm not going to save you, but I'm also not going to watch you destroy yourselves without at least giving you the tools to help yourselves. What you do with them is up to you. My father appeared behind her in the hallway. We don't need your charity. It's not charity. It's me ensuring that 10 years from now, you can't claim you failed because I didn't help. I'm helping the only way I'm willing to help. The rest is on you. My mother's hands were trembling as she looked through the folder. Sarah, we made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. Can't we? No, I said firmly. We can't. You don't get to hurt someone for 10 years and then expect forgiveness because you finally need something. That's not how it works. So this is revenge, my father said bitterly. You're enjoying watching us suffer. I'm not enjoying anything. I'm simply refusing to be responsible for fixing problems you created. There's a difference. I turned to leave, then paused and looked back. One more thing. The William Mitchell Foundation for Displaced LGBTQ Youth. Grandpa William created it 5 years ago. I'm going to be running it now, and I'm going to expand it. Every kid who gets kicked out by their family will have a place to go, resources to help them, and people who will support them. I'm going to build something that ensures no other 18-year-old has to sleep in their car because their parents chose prejudice over love. My mother's face crumpled. Sarah, please, I'm not doing it to hurt you. I'm doing it to help them. But I want you to know that every young person we help, every life we change, every family we build from the ashes of rejection, that's Grandpa William's legacy. That's what he chose was over leaving you his money. That's what happens when you love conditionally. Someone builds something better from what you destroyed. I walked away and didn't look back. This time, it felt final in a way it hadn't before. This time, I wasn't the scared teenager they'd thrown away. I was the woman who'd survived their rejection and built something better. Maya was waiting for me at Grandpa William's house. How did it go? She asked. It's done, I said. It's finally done. Over the next few weeks, things happened quickly. Maya and I put our Seattle apartment up for rent and moved to Connecticut. We converted 3 rooms on the 2nd floor of Grandpa William's house into offices for the foundation. I hired 2 staff members to help run operations. We started planning an expansion that would add 2 more emergency housing facilities in different states. I also did something I'd been thinking about since learning about the inheritance. I set up a scholarship fund specifically for children of parents who'd kicked them out. Full tuition, housing, and living expenses for any LGBTQ student who could prove they'd been disowned by their family. The first year, we'd fund 10 full scholarships. As the foundation grew, we'd fund more. The media picked up the story. Local news first, then regional, then national. Heiress uses inheritance to help LGBTQ youth, read one headline. Woman disowned by family builds. Empire of support for others, read another. I gave interviews carefully, always focusing on the foundation's work rather than my personal story. But inevitably, people learned about my parents and their rejection. The court of public opinion was not kind to them. Their church asked them to step down from their volunteer positions. My mother's country club friends began avoiding her. My father's business lost clients who didn't want to be associated with people who'd kicked out their gay daughter. The social standing they'd valued so much crumbled. Daniel called me 3 weeks after our confrontation. Sarah, this is destroying them, he said. Mom can barely leave the house. Dad's business is failing. Can't you make it stop? Make what stop? I'm not doing anything to them. I'm running a foundation that helps people. If they're facing social consequences for their actions, that's not my doing. That's reality. But you could say something. You could tell people it wasn't as bad as they think. I could lie, you mean? I could minimize what they did to protect their reputation. No, Daniel, I won't do that. They made their choices knowing people might judge them for it. They just never thought anyone would find out. Please, Sarah, they're my parents. I love them. Then help them, I said. Help them face reality, downsize their life, learn to live within their means, help them become better people. But don't ask me to rescue them from the consequences of their own actions. That's not love. That's enabling. He hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't expect to hear from him again, but I was wrong. 2 months after our confrontation, Daniel showed up at the foundation offices unannounced. I was in the middle of interviewing a potential counselor when my assistant knocked on the door. I'm sorry to interrupt, but your brother is here. He says it's important. I excused myself and went to the reception area. Daniel stood there looking uncomfortable, his hands shoved in his pockets. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Can we talk? He asked. I led him to my private office and closed the door. What do you want, Daniel? He sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I waited, saying nothing. When you were kicked out, I didn't think it was right. I was 18, yeah, but I knew it was wrong. I wanted to help you. I wanted to reach out. He looked at his hands. But Mom and Dad said if I had any contact with you, they'd cut me off too. They'd stop paying for my college, kick me out, everything. I was scared. Sarah, I was a coward. So you chose their money over your sister, I said flatly. I chose survival. At least that's what I told myself. He looked up at me and I saw genuine regret in his eyes. But I've been thinking a lot lately about what survival really means, about what kind of person I became by making that choice. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm dropping out of medical school. He said it like he was confessing a crime. I can't do it anymore. I hate it. I only went because Dad wanted me to, because it was prestigious, because it fit the image he had of what our family should be. I've been miserable for 4 years, and I finally realized I was doing the same thing they made you do, pretending to be someone I'm not to keep their approval. This surprised me. What do you actually want to do? I want to be a teacher, elementary school. I've been volunteering at an after-school program for underprivileged kids, and it's the only time I feel like myself. But Mom and Dad are furious. They said if I drop out, they won't help me anymore. They'll consider it throwing away my future. He laughed bitterly. Sound familiar? It did. Painfully so. I'm not asking for money, he said quickly. I know you don't owe me anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. I understand what it cost you to be honest about who you are, and I understand what it cost me to lie about who I was. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, of hidden agenda, but all I saw was exhaustion and something that looked like genuine remorse. What are you going to do? I'm moving out of their house. I got accepted to a teaching program at a state school. I'll take out loans, work part-time, figure it out, the same way you did. He stood up. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything, and I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to see it 10 years ago. He turned to leave and paused at the door. The work you're doing here with the foundation, it's incredible. Grandpa William would be so proud of you. After he left, I sat at my desk for a long time, processing what had just happened. Maya found me there an hour later, staring out the window. Everything okay? She asked. I told her about Daniel's visit. Do you think he's sincere? I asked. Does it matter? Even if he is, that doesn't erase 10 years of silence. No, it doesn't, but it's still something. I thought about the scared 18-year-old version of Daniel, faced with the same impossible choice I'd been given. He'd taken the coward's path, yes, but he'd also been a victim of our parents' conditional love, just in a different way. What are you thinking? Maya asked gently. I'm thinking about forgiveness. Not for them, for my parents, but maybe for Daniel. He was young and scared and trying to survive a a toxic situation. That doesn't make what he did okay, but it makes it understandable. Maya sat down next to me. You don't have to decide anything right now. Just sit with it. She was right. I had time. That was the gift Grandpa William had given me. The freedom to make decisions on my own timeline, without pressure, without financial desperation, driving my choices. The foundation was thriving. In our first 2 months of expanded operations, we'd helped 43 young people find safe housing. We'd enrolled 12 students in our scholarship program. We'd connected over 100 families with counseling services. The work was hard and often heartbreaking, but it was also deeply meaningful. One afternoon, I met with a 17-year-old girl named Emma who'd been kicked out 3 days earlier for coming out as transgender. She sat in my office, her few possessions in a backpack, her eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. I recognized that look. I'd seen it in my own mirror 10 years ago. You're safe now, I told her. We have a room ready for you. Food, clothes, counseling, whatever you need. And when you're ready, we'll help you figure out your next steps. Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why would you help me? Because someone helped me when I needed it, and because no kid should have to face this alone. I showed her Grandpa William's photo on my desk. This man taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them. We're showing up for you. She cried then, and I let her. Sometimes crying is the first step toward healing. That evening, I got an unexpected call from my mother's sister, Aunt Linda. We'd never been particularly close, but she'd been kind to me before the family betrayal. Sarah, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the foundation website. What can I do for you, Aunt Linda? I wanted you to know that I think what you're doing is wonderful. The foundation, I mean. Your grandfather would be so proud. She paused. I also wanted to apologize. I should have reached out to you 10 years ago. I should have stood up to your parents. I didn't, and I'm sorry. Thank you, I said, surprised by the apology. There's something else. Your mother called me last week. They're losing the house. The bank is foreclosing. She wanted to know if they could stay with me for a while. Another pause. I said no. I didn't know what to say to that. I love my sister, but what she did to you was unforgivable, and she's not even sorry for the right reasons. She's sorry they're facing consequences, not sorry for what they did to you. That's not the same thing. No, it's not. I just wanted you to know that not everyone in the family supported what they did. Some of us just didn't speak up when we should have. That's on us, and I'm sorry. After we hung up, I told Maya about the conversation. Your parents are losing their house, she said quietly. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Part of me feels vindicated. Part of me feels sad. Mostly I just feel tired of it all. You don't have to feel any particular way. There's no rule book for how to feel when the people who hurt you face consequences. She was right. But it didn't make the emotional tangle any easier to navigate. The foreclosure happened 3 weeks later. I found out through Aunt Linda, who called to tell me my parents had moved into a small rental apartment across town. They'd had to sell most of their furniture to cover immediate expenses. The life they'd built on borrowed money and borrowed time had finally collapsed. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I simply continued with my work. Then, 6 months after our confrontation, something unexpected happened. I received a letter, not from my parents, but from a woman named Jennifer Morrison. She wrote that she'd been following the foundation's work and wanted to share her story. 20 years ago, my parents kicked me out for being gay. I spent 5 years homeless, struggling, barely surviving. I lost those years to pain and poverty and the trauma of being discarded by the people who were supposed to love me. Now I'm a successful therapist specializing in LGBTQ youth, and I spend every day helping kids who went through what I did. When I read about your foundation, I cried. I cried because I wished something like this had existed when I needed it. I cried because you took your pain and turned it into something beautiful. And I cried because I saw myself in your story. The scared kid who survived and then decided to make sure others wouldn't have to suffer alone. She ended the letter by offering her services as a volunteer counselor for the foundation. I called her immediately and hired her on the spot. Stories like Jennifer's became common. People reached out from across the country, sharing their experiences, offering support, contributing to the foundation's work. Some were success stories of survival and thriving. Others were still struggling. All of them reinforced why this work mattered. The foundation's first annual gala was scheduled for December, exactly 1 year after Grandpa William's death. We planned it as both a fundraiser and a celebration of survival. I invited everyone who'd helped me over the years. Maya's parents, Aunt Linda, the professors who'd believed in me, the therapists who'd helped me heal. I didn't invite my parents or Daniel, but Daniel called me the week before the gala. Sarah, I saw the invitation online. I know I'm not invited, but I wanted to ask if I could attend. I'll buy a ticket like everyone else. I just want to support what you're doing. Why? I asked. Because I'm finally becoming someone I'm proud of, and part of that is supporting the people who've always had the courage I lacked. You don't have to acknowledge me. I just want to be there. I thought about it for a long moment. Fine. But Daniel, if you come as a guest, not as my brother. I'm not ready for that. I understand. Thank you. The gala was beautiful. We held it at a hotel ballroom, decorated simply but elegantly. Over 300 people attended. Survivors shared their stories. Donors pledged support. The foundation raised over $200,000 in a single evening. Daniel was there sitting in the back. He didn't try to approach me. He simply listened to the stories and clapped when others did. As I watched him from the podium, I realized he was crying. At the end of the evening, as people were leaving, he approached me briefly. Thank you for letting me be here. What you've built is incredible. It's what Grandpa William built, I corrected. I'm just continuing his work. No, Sarah. He laid the foundation, but you're building the house. There's a difference. He handed me an envelope. I'm not asking you to open this now. It's just something I wanted you to have. After he left, I opened the envelope in private. Inside was a check for $5,000. More money than Daniel probably probably had to his name if he was truly paying his own way through school. There was also a note. Sarah, I know this doesn't fix anything, but it's every dollar I've saved from my part-time teaching assistant job over the past 6 months. I want it to go to the foundation, to help someone the way I should have helped you. I'm sorry it's not more. I'm sorry it's 10 years too late, but it's all I have to give right now, and I want you to have it. Love, Daniel. I stared at the check for a long time. $5,000 was nothing compared to the $12 million I'd inherited, but it represented something different. Sacrifice, genuine apology, an attempt at restitution. It was Daniel putting his money where his words had been, proving through action that he was trying to change. I didn't cash the check. Instead, I framed it and hung it in my office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that people could change, that genuine remorse existed, that sometimes family betrayal wasn't irredeemable, even if forgiveness still took time. Maya found me looking at it the next day. Are you going to rebuild something with him? She asked. Maybe. Eventually. Not now, but maybe someday. I turned to look at her. He's trying. That's more than his parents ever did. You're allowed to give him a chance if you want to. Just make sure it's what you want, not what you think you should want. That distinction mattered. For too many years, I'd done what I thought I should do to earn approval. Now I was learning to do what I actually wanted. And what I wanted, I realized, was to focus on my work and my life with Maya. If Daniel continued proving himself, maybe there would be space for him in our lives eventually. But that was a decision for future Sarah, not now Sarah. The foundation continued to grow. By the end of our first year, we'd helped over 200 young people. We'd expanded to 5 emergency housing facilities across 3 states. The scholarship fund was supporting 30 students. We'd connected hundreds of families with counseling services. And we were just getting started. 3 years after that confrontation in Grandpa William's living room, I stood in the garden he'd loved, looking at the memorial stone we'd installed. William Mitchell, beloved grandfather, builder of second chances. Maya stood beside me, her hand in mine. The foundation had become something bigger than either of us had imagined. We now had 10 emergency housing facilities across 7 states. Our scholarship program supported over 100 students. We'd helped more than 800 young people find safe housing, get counseling, and start rebuilding their lives. The work was exhausting and rewarding in equal measure. I thought about the scared 18-year-old girl I'd been, sleeping in her car, wondering if she'd survive. I thought about Grandpa William finding me, choosing me, showing me what unconditional love looked like. I thought about the inheritance that had given me not just financial security, but the power to help others avoid the pain I'd experienced. My parents had lost everything they'd valued: the house, the social standing, the carefully maintained image of success. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment now, both working retail jobs to pay rent. My father's business had failed completely. My mother had sold most of her jewelry and designer clothes. The life they'd built on appearances and borrowed money was gone. I'd heard through Aunt Linda that they'd finally declared bankruptcy 6 months ago. The $300,000 in debt had been partially discharged, but the damage to their lives was permanent. They were in their early 60s, starting over with nothing, facing a future they'd never imagined. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, just a distant sadness for what could have been if they'd chosen differently. If they'd chosen love over prejudice, acceptance over appearances, their daughter over their social standing. But they'd made their choices, and I'd made mine. Daniel had continued teaching. He'd graduated from his program and gotten a job at an elementary school in a diverse neighborhood. He sent me updates every few months, photos of his classroom, stories about his students, small moments that showed he'd found his calling. We weren't close, but we weren't estranged either. We existed in a careful middle ground, building something new from the ruins of what had been destroyed. He'd tried several times to convince me to reconcile with our parents. They're struggling, Sarah. They're barely surviving. Dad's health isn't great, and Mom is working 40 hours a week on her feet. Can't you? No, I'd said firmly each time. I gave them resources to help themselves 3 years ago. What they do with their situation now is not my responsibility. They're reaping what they sowed, Daniel. That's not cruelty. That's consequence. But they're our parents. They stopped being my parents when they kicked me out. They made that choice. I'm simply honoring it. He'd stopped asking after the 3rd or 4th attempt, finally understanding that my boundaries were firm. The truth was, I'd built a life I loved. Maya and I had married in a small ceremony at Grandpa William's house, surrounded by the family we'd chosen. We'd adopted 2 dogs who spent their days lounging in the garden. We talked about having children someday, maybe through adoption, giving some kid the loving home neither of us had fully experienced growing up. My work with the foundation gave me purpose beyond anything I'd imagined. Every young person we helped was a victory over the prejudice and hatred that had nearly destroyed me. Every family we reunited through counseling was proof that love could overcome conditioning. Every scholarship we funded was a middle finger to everyone who'd said queer kids didn't deserve support. I thought about my mother's words from that confrontation. It's just a baby. Your brother's party matters more. No, wait, that was someone else's story. My mother had said, you're being vindictive, using that money to punish us. But punishment would have required me to actively work to harm them. I hadn't done that. I'd simply refused to save them from their own choices. I'd simply taken the gift Grandpa William had given me and used it to build something meaningful. That their lives had fallen apart wasn't my revenge. It was their consequence. One afternoon in late spring, I received a letter from my mother. It had been 3 years since I'd heard from her directly. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. Dear Sarah, it began. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I'm writing simply because I need to say these words, whether you ever read them or not. You were right about everything, about us valuing appearances promises over authenticity, about our love being conditional, about us choosing prejudice over our own daughter. You were right, and we were wrong. Terribly, irrevocably wrong. Losing everything, the house, our social standing, our financial security, was painful, but not as painful as finally understanding what we lost when we chose to lose you. We threw away our daughter, a remarkable human being, because we were more afraid of what other people would think than committed to loving you as you are. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not asking you to help us financially or to forgive us or to let us back into your life. I'm simply telling you that I see now what I couldn't see then, that I understand the magnitude of what we did, that if I could go back and make different choices, I would, but I can't, and I have to live with that. I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to say that, but it's true. The foundation, the lives you're changing, the person you've become. It's everything I should have celebrated when you were 18. Instead, I condemned it. That's my shame to carry. I hope you're happy. I hope Maya is good to you. I hope your life is everything you deserve it to be. And I hope that someday you can think of us without the pain we caused overwhelming everything else. With love that came too late, Mom. I read the letter 3 times, then I put it in a drawer in my desk and didn't respond. Not because I was being cruel, but because I had nothing to say. The words were nice, the sentiment seemed genuine, but they couldn't undo 10 years of silence. They couldn't erase the trauma of being kicked out. They couldn't make me forget sleeping in my car, wondering if my own parents would even care if something happened to me. An apology, no matter how heartfelt, doesn't obligate forgiveness. That was something I'd learned in therapy. Acknowledgement of wrongdoing is the bare minimum, not a ticket to restoration. My mother had finally seen the truth. Good for her, but that didn't mean I owed her a relationship. I showed the letter to Maya that evening. She read it silently, then looked up at me. How do you feel? Mostly nothing. A little sad maybe, but not moved to respond. You don't have to. Ever, if you don't want to. I know. I think that's what makes me feel peaceful about it. I'm not refusing out of spite. I'm simply choosing not to reopen a door that's been closed for 3 years. That's different. We were sitting in the garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The dogs were chasing each other around the rose bushes. The house behind us, Grandpa William's house, our house now, glowed warm in the fading light. This was home. This was family. This was enough. Do you ever wish things had been different? Maya asked. That your parents had accepted you from the start? Sometimes. But then I think about who I'd be if they had. I'd probably be someone who took family for granted, someone who never learned to build her own support system, someone who never understood how important it is to fight for kids who have no one fighting for them. I looked at her. I wouldn't wish my experience on anyone, but I also wouldn't trade who I became because of it. That was the truth I'd arrived at after years of therapy and reflection. The trauma was real, and it had shaped me, but I'd taken that trauma and forged it into something meaningful. I'd turned my pain into purpose, and that was a gift I'd given myself, not something my parents could take credit for or claim any part of. The Foundation's 3rd annual gala approached. This year, we'd invited Emma, the transgender girl I'd met my first month running the foundation, to speak. She'd been with us for 2 years now, had graduated high school, and was starting college on one of our scholarships. Her story of survival and thriving was exactly what we wanted to showcase. Daniel came again, sitting in the back as he had before. He'd become a regular donor now, small amounts, but consistent. Every month, $50 from his teaching salary went to the foundation. It wasn't much, but it was steady, and it showed commitment. At the end of the evening, he approached me again. Sarah, I don't want to overstep, but I need to tell you something. Dad had a heart attack 2 weeks ago. He's okay, but it was serious. He's in the hospital recovering. I felt a complicated twist in my chest. Not quite concern, not quite indifference. Why are you telling me? Because he asked me to. He wanted you to know. Not because he expects you to visit or anything. Just because he thought you should know. Okay, thank you for telling me. That's it? You're not going to see him? Daniel, if he'd wanted me in his life, he's had 3 years to reach out. One heart attack doesn't erase 10 years of silence followed by 3 years of consequence. I hope he recovers, but I'm not going to pretend we have a relationship just because he's sick. Daniel nodded slowly. I understand. I had to ask, but I understand. I did feel a flicker of something, maybe compassion, maybe the ghost of daughterly concern, but I didn't act on it. People don't get rewarded with reconciliation just because they face mortality. They get what they've earned through their actions, and my father had earned my absence. 2 weeks later, Daniel called again. Dad's home from the hospital. He's okay, but he's been thinking a lot about everything. He asked me to give you a message. What message? He said to tell you that he's sorry, that he understands if you never forgive him, that he knows he failed you as a father, and that he's proud of what you built, even if he doesn't deserve to be. I was quiet for a long moment. Okay, thank you for passing that along. Is there anything you want me to tell him? No. If he wants to say something to me, he can write me a letter like Mom did. Otherwise, I have nothing to add. Daniel sighed. You've gotten hard, Sarah. No, I corrected him. I've gotten strong. There's a difference. Hard would be actively trying to hurt them. Strong is simply refusing to let them hurt me again. I'm protecting myself, Daniel. That's not the same as being cruel. He didn't call again after that. Life continued. The foundation grew. Maya and I started the adoption process. We traveled to Europe, to Asia, to South America, always coming home to the garden and the house and the work that mattered. We built a life that was full and meaningful and entirely our own. 4 years after the confrontation, Aunt Linda called with news. Your father passed away. Heart failure. It was quick. I felt a strange numbness. When's the funeral? Tomorrow. I understand if you don't want to come. I'll think about it. I didn't go. Maya offered to go with me if I wanted support, but I declined. The man who died hadn't been my father in any meaningful sense for 14 years. Going to his funeral felt dishonest, like pretending we'd had a relationship we hadn't. Daniel called me afterward, angry. He was our father, Sarah. You should have been there. He stopped being my my father when he kicked me out. I'm sorry you lost yours, Daniel. I lost mine a long time ago. That's cold. That's honest. I don't owe him grief I don't feel. I don't owe you the performance of being a bereaved daughter when I'm not. He made his choices. I made mine. Neither of us gets to rewrite history now. My mother sent another letter a month after the funeral. This one was shorter. Your father's last words were about you. He said he wished he'd been brave enough to love you as you were. I wish it too. But wishes don't change the past. I'm sorry, Sarah, for all of it. I put that letter in the drawer with the other one and didn't respond to that one either. 5 years after the inheritance, 10 years after being kicked out, I stood in the foundation's newest facility, cutting the ribbon on our 11th emergency housing location. Over 1,000 young people had passed through our doors. Over 200 were in our scholarship program. We'd reunited dozens of families through counseling. We'd changed laws in 3 states regarding conversion therapy. We'd built something that would outlast all of us. Emma stood beside me, now a college junior studying social work. I want to work here when I graduate, she told me. I want to do what you did, turn my pain into purpose. You already are, I said. Every day you survive, every step you take forward, you're proving that family betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. That's powerful. That night, Maya and I celebrated with dinner in the garden. The roses were blooming, and the evening air was warm. Our 2 dogs sprawled at our feet. We talked about the adoption process, about the child who might join our family soon, about the future we were building together. Do you ever regret it? Maya asked suddenly. Not forgiving them? Not reconciling? I thought about it carefully. No, I set boundaries that protected me. I honored my own needs instead of prioritizing their feelings. That's not something to regret. That's something to be proud of. Even with your father gone, even with that, death doesn't sanctify people. It just makes them gone. He had years to apologize, to change, to try to make things right. He chose not to until it was too late. That's not my failure. That's his. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset. Somewhere across town, my mother was living in her small apartment, working her retail job, existing in the wreckage of the life she'd built on lies and appearances. Somewhere in the city, Daniel was probably grading papers, building the life he'd finally had the courage to choose for himself. And here, in this garden, in this house, in this life I'd built from nothing, I was exactly where I needed to be. I'd taken the inheritance my grandfather left me, not just the money, but the lesson of unconditional love, and I'd multiplied it 1,000-fold. I'd built a family of choice. I'd created a foundation that would help people for generations. I'd proven that being kicked out at 18 didn't have to define you. It could refine you if you let it. My parents had demanded my inheritance, believing they deserved it more than I did. They'd believed family meant I owed them something simply because we shared blood. They'd learned too late that family is something you build through love and support and showing up when it matters, not something you can demand after years of absence. Did I feel guilty about their suffering? No. Did I feel triumphant? Also no. I simply felt free. Free from the need for their approval. Free from the weight of their expectations. Free to live authentically and love without condition. That freedom was worth more than any inheritance. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Morrison, the therapist who joined us 3 years ago. Just placed a 17-year-old with our Boston facility. Her parents kicked her out yesterday for being lesbian. She's safe now because of what you built. Thank you. I showed the text to Maya. That's what it's all about, I said. Every kid we help, every life we change. That's Grandpa William's legacy. That's what happens when you choose love over hate, acceptance over prejudice, authenticity over appearances. And your legacy, Maya added. You took what he gave you and built something even bigger. Maybe. Or maybe I just knew what it felt like to be that 17-year-old girl with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Maybe I just remembered the terror and desperation and bone-deep loneliness of being discarded by the people who were supposed to love you most. And maybe I'd decided that if I could prevent even one person from feeling that way, the pain I'd endured would have meaning. That's what my parents never understood. They thought kicking me out was teaching me a lesson. They thought cutting me off would force me to conform. Instead, they taught me that I was strong enough to survive without them. They showed me that blood doesn't make family, love does. They gave me the gift of knowing I could build something beautiful from the ashes of rejection. So no, I didn't forgive them. No, I didn't reconcile with them. No, I didn't give them my grandfather's money when they demanded it. And no, I didn't regret any of those decisions. Because the best revenge isn't harming the people who hurt you. The best revenge is building a life so fulfilling, so meaningful, so authentically yours that their opinion of it becomes irrelevant. The best revenge is thriving. And I was thriving. Have you ever faced a situation where family demanded something from you after years of silence? Where people who hurt you expected you to rescue them from consequences of their own making? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. How did you handle it? What boundaries did you set? Your story might help someone else who's facing a similar situation. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Thanks for listening, and remember, you don't owe anyone access to your life just because they share your DNA. Take care of yourselves.